Hi, my name is Dr. Zaria Alexandra Rubin, and I am the CEO at Mom Incorporated. Um, I'm actually currently a stay-at-home mom to my beautiful daughter Azalea, and prior to that, I was a medical director working at a mid-sized pharmaceutical company in Atlanta, Georgia. And prior to that, I was a neurologist. So I've been working in social media, in and around social media for about the past 5 years or so. And it's also been a personal interest of mine, and I've managed to keep up on the personal side of things as I'm not working currently. What do I like about social media? I'm very social and very chatty, so that part alone appealed to me. I'm also always interested in what's new and different out there. I'm not sort of set in my ways, like, oh, these newfangled apps and games and things like that. If it's new, I basically want to know about it and learn about it. I also have a strong interest in language, in foreign language and linguistics. And I think that part of understanding social media is being able to speak the language, if you will. You have to understand the jargon and the lingo and know how to craft things and write things in such a way that they'll make sense to other users and to your audience, and you won't look like a complete neophyte. Moving on to the questions. Question number one, my news sources for social media. Well, I'm a big fan of Mashable. I think that Pete Cashmore does have his finger on the pulse of what's going on in the world of social media, and the articles are interesting and informative. Aside from that, I think you can get a lot of great news on social media itself, such as depending on who you follow on Twitter. And the New York Times, although I wouldn't say they're necessarily the cutting edge in terms of getting the news before it breaks. They are kind of standard old media, but yet they do cover a lot of interesting new trends in their tech section, in their advertising section. I'm also a big advertising aficionada and have done some work for Advertising Week, the Festival Advertising Week, but I do follow the publication Advertising Week, Ad Week, and Ad Age. So I think there's a lot of interesting stuff there in terms of from a marketing perspective. And from the pharmaceutical side of things, MM is one of the big publications there, and I do try to keep up on that as well. LinkedIn has actually become an interesting source of news and updates on social media because there's just a lot of good articles that are posted there by people who are using LinkedIn in that capacity. And depending on who you follow and whose feed you follow, you can get some good information there. Question number two, do I write my own social media content? Yes and no. So on a personal level, yes, I do, of course, write my own social media content and have a lot of fun doing it. Certainly on Twitter or using Foursquare and tweeting that out, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. It's funny, a lot of my friends got mad at me a couple years ago when I started using hashtags on Facebook. They thought that I was being annoying, pretentious, misguided. What are you doing using hashtags on Facebook? And of course, the irony is everyone uses hashtags on Facebook now. So I'm not going to say I invented it, but I definitely was doing it when no one else was doing it because I thought it was fun. I thought it was a kind of a cheeky commentary on how social media, if you will, has transformed communication and language and how it spills over from one medium to another, and how it's actually kind of influenced the way we talk and the way we think. And the way we classify metadata. So, on a professional level, no, I wasn't really writing my own social media content, but I was reviewing it. So, I was part of a medical review team for promotional review committee, and the marketers or PR people would bring in the social media content, and we would have to review it for medical accuracy, and as well for legal and regulatory concerns, like could that be put out there? Was there anything concerning about that content once it goes public? And the pharmaceutical industry is very tightly regulated, so there's a balance between being innovative, creative, um, creating content that was interesting and marketable, and content that fell within the very strict guidelines of that industry. So I think that is that's an area of exploration coming up. Social media in the pharmaceutical world, it's uncharted waters for now. How do I get ahead of my competition? Well, um, currently that's not really applicable to my situation, but in the past, working at the pharmaceutical company that I worked with, I think it was a matter of obviously content being king and creating content that was desirable for the user base, and also being original. It's difficult to be original and authentic in this day and age, but I think that if you want to outshine the competition, you have to do something that's different, but it can't be different just for the sake of being different. It has to also be true to your brand and true to your objectives. So depending on what you want to accomplish, your strategy and your content has to reflect that. And I think, you know, that's really the only way to outshine the competition, is just kind of be the best at what you're doing, um, and choose wisely. Maybe don't try to do everything well, and do everything in a mediocre fashion, and do one thing well, really well. You know, it's kind of like, I don't know, someone used an analogy once about a waterproof radio in the shower. You really only want it to do one thing: play music in the shower. It doesn't need to, make you breakfast, etc., and short circuit. So that would be my strategy. How do you evaluate new social media platforms and tools in terms of their effectiveness? Well, I think that, a lot of these social media platforms, they arose for a very specific, very limited purpose that the creators intended. And what's happened is that they've just kind of exploded once you allow the users to run free, if you will, and really dictate what it is that the platform can do. So the platform itself may not be designed to do what it ultimately ends up doing. Twitter, for example, was supposed to be an SMS system. Facebook, just a way, I think, for Mark Zuckerberg to get back at an ex-girlfriend. So it's fascinating the way platforms evolve just through usage. So I think that really only time will tell how certain platforms are meant to be used. The way I evaluate them is really just by using them, and exploring the content that's there already, and then trying to use it myself, and think, how would I use this? How would I best employ this technique or method? Is this easy to use, hard to use? Can I use it on my phone? Can I use it, I'm not always at a computer. So I think that's sort of a key indicator, is what's the learning curve? How easily can you use it? How easily can you adapt it, and integrate it with other forms of content, video, text, blogging, um, all that sort of stuff. And I think that really your choice of platform is ultimately dependent on what it is that you want to do and what it is that you want to accomplish. Who do you want to reach? How do you want to reach them? What do you want the user to do as a result of your content? Do you want them to read something, click something, create something? What's the response that you're looking for? What sort of action are you looking for them to take? Yeah. So, questions on definitions and budget. What's my definition of social media and digital marketing? How do I budget for it, etc., etc.? This is a tough question. I don't really like it. I think that part of the problem today is that we've created these kind of delineations and distinctions between social media marketing and marketing per se. Oh, you need a social media person, and you need a this person and that person, and then what happens is the strategy and the overall process is maybe not all that integrated. So I think that you really need someone overseeing marketing in general, and that person really needs to have a good command of social and digital media, because that's kind of where things are going, or where they are right now. Let's face it. I mean, who reads print anymore? Nobody. Um, and even the internet, itself is not that popular anymore in terms of where are people getting their content. I mean, yes, blogs, etc., but it used to be that a company would have a website, but now everyone has a Facebook page. I mean, that transformation has really only taken place in the last couple of years, and it's just kind of astonishing that for me, I spend a lot of time on Facebook, I'll be honest. As a new mom, that's what you do. And if it's not on Facebook, I'm kind of like, really? They don't have a Facebook page? What are they doing? And I think that, everything can then go through Facebook. You can tweet to Facebook, you can Instagram to Facebook. And that's really kind of a way to tie everything together. Now, you know, the definition of social and digital marketing, I mean, you're really using these tools to achieve an end goal for your product, your company. And how you achieve that really depends on, your command of the platforms and what you want to accomplish. And it really doesn't make sense to just kind of like, oh, let's do something with Twitter, let's do something with Facebook. Um, those are usually kind of the wrong approaches and the wrong strategies. And I think that you have to really first have a solid understanding of what it is you want to achieve, what content you want to put out there, and then what your spend is. I mean, I think you need to create a budget that makes sense in terms of what sort of return you're looking for, how big of a project you want it to be. It can be a bit challenging in this day and age to create budgets based on ROI for social media, but I guess we're going to get to that in another question. Okay, next question. Which platforms or sites should we keep our eye on in the future, up and coming sites? I think there's always buzz about new things coming up the pipe and along the horizon, but I think there's basically a new social network platform that launches every day. The question is, are any of them going to stick or last? And are any of the ones that are currently out there, are they going to kind of become bigger? And I think that's kind of really where I'll focus my answer right now. I think that we've seen a lot of traction with LinkedIn. It used to be LinkedIn was just kind of like a Rolodex website, or where you might look for job leads or contacts. But I think it has become a lot more than that, with people publishing their news feeds and articles, etc. And I think that LinkedIn does have potential, certainly for business, B2B contacts and connections, but as well just as another social media platform where people spend a lot of their time. There's just a lot of eyeballs on LinkedIn. I think Vine is another interesting one, and the rise of sort of micro video, I think, is interesting. What people have managed to do with these really brief videos, I think is very interesting and cool. And we'll see where that goes. And then the question that's on everyone's mind, the age-old question: what will ever happen with Google Plus? Will it ever take off? And I don't have an answer to that. I think that there's just so much potential there. There's potential for Google Plus to be the Google of social media platforms, and it just hasn't happened, and I don't really know why. I mean, maybe it's just trying to be too many things, too many people, but it does have a massive user base, and it has a massive wealth of user data and information that could be very interesting for marketing purposes and tracking purposes. And hey, I'm always looking for the next big thing on the horizon. Question seven. So this doesn't quite apply to me currently, as I don't own an agency, freelance agency, but I do freelance consulting work. So I do have to convince people of my capabilities on a regular basis. And I think when it comes to social media prowess, um, walk the walk, talk the talk. Are you on the platforms? Do you have followers on Twitter? Can you speak the language? Do you know what you're talking about? Or is it just kind of a regurgitated PowerPoint presentation? I think, authenticity is really key when trying to sell your company or yourself to a new account and trying to convince them that their money is going to be well spent because you actually do know what you're doing, and you understand what they want to do and you have the capability to do it. And I think, when it comes to Twitter, I could definitely persuade people that I do know what I'm doing there and could make their Twitter presence felt and known and interesting. And I guess my claim to fame was that I was retweeted once by the White House, and that was kind of fun. It was my brief 15 minutes of Twitter fame. But yeah, you just have to own your capabilities and your specialty area in order to attract customers and clients. What is my biggest challenge when educating the uneducated about social media? I think that's a great question, and I think that I think uh, the problem is some people start at too high of a level of presupposed knowledge. And I think when you're trying to explain social media or concept to people, you have to really, really dumb it down. Don't assume they understand what a like is or a retweet or a hashtag. They don't. It was quite funny. I was at a social media meeting. We were talking about strategy at our company, and someone in the audience raised his hand. It was, he's an older guy, not that much older than I am, and he sort of said, "Let me understand. So Facebook, when you like something, does this mean that you endorse it?" And he obviously, he's never been on Facebook. He's never liked anything. And I think that's part of the problem when explaining social media to people who don't know anything about it is that they literally have never tried it. They've never been on it. And that was a problem that we ran into with some of our legal team as well, is that we were making decisions and advising our brand managers on various aspects of social media, and some of these folks have never touched it. I think it helps to actually do a hands-on training. So to actually walk them through various things from, creating an account and a username to your first tweet or your first post on Facebook, what your news feed is, what your message area is, and try to compare that to things they understand, like your mailbox, your inbox, your Gmail. And it's just very tough. And sometimes I start high level on a conceptual level, like when I'm trying to explain Twitter to people, because I think there's actually a difference. There's explaining the mechanics of a platform to somebody, because they may not even know how it works on the most basic level. And then there's explaining the philosophy or the psychology of the platform, and that's actually sometimes more difficult because people just think, why would I bother? Why bother with Twitter? It's so stupid, or it's just people talking about what their cat did. And I have to try to explain to them, no, it's actually a lot more complex and more nuanced than that. And I use the sort of the three-pronged analogy that Twitter has three prongs. Information in, information out, and shared information or dialogue. So information in is you're just a consumer of content, of news, of people's feeds, and you can just be a lurker and just never write a tweet in your life, and you can just really follow all of the different, sources that you find interesting, and you can just absorb content that way. Information out, you're tweeting. You have a soapbox, you have a microphone, and you have an opportunity to say whatever it is that you want to say to the world. So you better make it good. And it can be 140 characters. It can actually be a lot longer than 140 characters if you include a meaningful link within your tweet. An image, a blog post, an article, a video, really you have a lot of possibilities. And then there's the dialogue that happens on Twitter that's very cool. that you can address things to people by calling them out in your tweet, adding them, hashtagging their specific topic or company, or there's so many ways to alert people to what it is that you're tweeting. And it's really that back and forth, that dialogue where fun things happen and you make virtual friends. I've actually made virtual friends on Twitter that I've become friends with in real life, and share opportunities, business opportunities. Um, it's kind of a cool thing. So yeah, I would say start with the basics. It's never too simple. It's actually very hard to make something complicated simple. So, what's the biggest challenge when discussing ROI of social media to the higher ups? Well, I think number one, the first challenge you have to face is that often some of the C suite people do not understand social media at all. So if you're jumping into the ROI discussion, you're probably skipping over an important step, which is that they don't know the platforms. They don't understand what it is that you're trying to do, let alone how you're supposed to um, get a return and measure that return on your investment. So I think that sometimes there's a little bit of very gentle, respectful educating that has to take place. Now, of course, some CEOs and higher ups are very well versed in social media. And then in that case, you have to really have a serious discussion about, do we know, does your team know what they're doing? Does the brand team know what they're doing? And is the strategy appropriate for the return that you're expecting? I think you have to have a very specific goal in mind, and not just use kind of a shotgun social media approach. And I think that once you are able to identify that and articulate that, then I think you're going to get more buy-in from the C-suite folks. So, what's the biggest challenge when discussing ROI of social media to the higher ups? Well, I think number one, the first challenge you have to face is that often some of the C suite people do not understand social media at all. So if you're jumping into the ROI discussion, you're probably skipping over an important step, which is that they don't know the platforms. They don't understand what it is that you're trying to do, let alone how you're supposed to um, get a return and measure that return on your investment. So I think that sometimes there's a little bit of very gentle, respectful educating that has to take place. Now, of course, some CEOs and higher ups are very well versed in social media. And then in that case, you have to really have a serious discussion about, do we know, does your team know what they're doing? Does the brand team know what they're doing? And is the strategy appropriate for the return that you're expecting? I think you have to have a very specific goal in mind, and not just use kind of a shotgun social media approach. And I think that once you are able to identify that and articulate that, then I think you're going to get more buy-in from the C-suite folks.